Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today is the 19th of November, and we're on page 50 of the magazine, and we're talking about the hoop skirt. Balancing high fashion with comfort and ease of use. In this case, literally, you're balancing this giant creation on your hips all day.
好，所以我们的中文标题是裙撑，撑起你裙子的那个东西，裙撑。副标题是撑起美丽的一片天。那英文标题 The hoop skirt 就是指裙撑。然后呢 balancing 你要在哪里中取得平衡呢？你要在 high fashion 就是在时髦、时尚，跟什么要达到平衡呢？跟 comfort 跟舒适，还有 ease of use 容易使用啊，能够达到平衡。
So we're talking about hoop skirts today. We're talking about...a very specific style of garment which was peculiar to Europe. But also, I mean, if you're interested in, after we read this article, if you're interested in it, there's a whole section of YouTube channels that are historical fashion enthusiasts, and they go into this stuff into so much detail. Like if you're into the giant skirts, the huge sleeves, the corsets, and all of that of the previous 3 centuries of European women's garments, they have you covered. Just type historical fashion YouTube and you probably will get all of the things.
所以各位如果看完这文章之后对裙撑有兴趣的话，其实可以去 YouTube 上面找哈，他们有这个一系列的讨论欧洲历史上的这个各种不同时期的各种穿着啊，你可以看得非常有趣。
And the key word is historical fashion.
那你要查那个关键字就是 historical fashion.
And then the date if you're interested in a specific era.
那如果你对哪一个时代特别有兴趣，你把那个时代打进去。
So let's read the article and talk about hoop skirts, and then we'll go back through and talk about the grammar of each sentence. Back in the mid-19th century, it would have been common to see upper-class women wearing skirts that extended outward in a wide shape. This distinctive silhouette was achieved through a structured garment known as the hoop skirt, which was designed to be worn under another skirt to give volume to the outer layer of a woman's outfit. Though hoop skirts of some form were first worn in the 16th century, their peak in popularity came during the 19th century in Victorian England. Commonly constructed from rigid materials such as whalebone or steel, hoop skirts enabled women's outfits to adopt a shape that emphasized a slender waist and wide hips. Prior to the invention of the hoop skirt, women would rely on wearing multiple petticoats under their skirt to get the desired silhouette. However, these petticoats were heavy and thus restricted movement. The hoop skirt provided a lighter and more manageable solution to achieving a fashionable look. For women in Victorian England, wearing a hoop skirt was an indication of high social status. On top of that, these skirts offered several practical benefits. In addition to providing comfort and ease of movement, they also served as a barrier to others, giving women a greater radius of personal space. This attribute was particularly valuable in crowded places. It should be noted that the hoop skirt design had several drawbacks, including the risk of catching fire, especially near open flames or fireplaces, or becoming entangled in machinery. Nevertheless, its popularity endured for many years due to its stylish appeal and relative comfort. Today, hoop skirts are recognized as a significant stage in the evolution in the history of women's clothing, illustrating how fashion, comfort, and social status can be balanced. So, starting off in the beginning of the article, it starts by saying, back in the mid-19th century. The 19th century is all of the century that starts with 18-something-something. It's confusing. The 20th century is 1900s, and we're the 21st century, starting with 2000. And this has confused me a lot, so I'm just pointing it out to you guys. The mid-19th century is the 1800s, so 1830, 40, 50, 60. That's the mid-19th century. And the interesting thing about the 19th century is how quickly the fashions changed. Like if you go from the 1400s, the 1500s, the 1600s, things evolved, but very slowly. And in the 16th century, which are the 1700s, that's when capitalism as a practice suddenly happened upon Europe. And after capitalism became kind of a thing and sort of got embedded into the social life of everybody, suddenly fashion changing quickly from decade to decade also became a thing. And so you can, like when you're talking about the 19th century, there's not one dress or one style that you can say is the 19th century style, like you could with the 16th century or the 15th century. And that's because every 10 years, things had got changed. But the fact that skirts were huge did sort of stay consistent, but not really, because sometimes they were very narrow and sometimes they were quite wide. Sometimes you had massive sleeves and sometimes you had no sleeves. But yeah, you can just say the most common thing that you can say about the 19th century is that the fashion was really extreme.
好，所以19世纪呢，它的时尚演变得非常的快，所以常常10年、20年就有很大的转变了。
So, but in our sentence says, it would have been common to see upper-class women wearing skirts that extended outward in a wide shape. And that's true. The majority of the time, there was a pretty wide skirt.
好，所以呢，我们回到19世纪中期的时候呢，那个时候 it would have been common， 就是从现在往回推测，当时应该是蛮普通的，可以看到upper class women 上层阶级的女性，她们穿着裙子 wearing skirts， 但是那个裙子是 that extended outward， 那个裙子会往外伸展， extend 就是往外伸展，应该就伸展， extend 本来是伸展的意思， to stretch forth or outward 也常常是往外伸展的，而且呢它的伸展是 in a wide shape， 以一个宽广的一个形状往外伸展。
So this distinctive silhouette, distinctive means very identifiable. It's very easy to notice. A silhouette is the shape that if you look at something from the side or if you trace its shadow, that would be the silhouette. And this was achieved through a structured garment. A garment is something you put on your body, anything from a glove to underwear to pants to a hat. These are all garments. Anything that you have to put your body through, so like definitely a shirt is a garment. A structured garment is one that has a shape separate from the shape of your body that can stand up by itself, actually, is kind of would be a structured garment. And this garment was known as the hoop skirt. And it was designed to be worn under another skirt to give volume to the outer layer of a woman's outfit. If you give volume to something, it means you give it a space. It creates its own space. And that was then designed to be covered up by the final layer of the outfit, which is the dress. And your outfit is your coordinated group of clothes that you're wearing.
好，所以呢，他说这个 distinctive， 这个很独特的、很特别的一种 silhouette 是这个轮廓或者形状。所以这样的一种这个很特别的一种裙子的形状呢 was achieved。我们如何达到的呢？我们是 through 透过一个 a structured garment 就是基本上就是 an article of clothing， 你可以穿着东西。那 structured 在这里的意思就是它是因为内部的结构而有特别的形式或者形状。Having a distinct physical shape or form, often provided by an internal structure 是这个意思。所以它是一个因为底下有东西撑着而产生的一种有形状的衣服。那这种衣服呢 known as the hoop skirt， 称之为这个 hoop skirt， hoop 就是环圈啊，一个环一个圈，那在这里就是这个裙撑。Which was designed， 这裙撑它是被设计 to be worn， 要穿在哪里呢 ？Under another skirt， 穿在另外一件裙子底下，目的是要能够 to give volume to，give volume to， 这 volume 在这里是体积的意思，所以 to give volume to 就是增加体积，增加什么的体积呢 ？To give volume to the outer layer， 就是外围。外面的那一层 of a woman's outfit， outfit 就是整套搭配起来穿的衣服，一套衣服包括配件等等的，所以各位可以想象那个时候他们要能够穿这个有裙撑的衣服，那一定是整套的衣服，所以他可以把整套衣服的 outer layer 外围的那一层呢把它撑大 give volume to。Though
hoop skirts of some form were first worn in the 16th century, their peak in popularity came during the 19th century in Victorian England.
好，那虽然呢这个裙撑 of some form 它是某种形式的裙撑，换句话说它这个形式会变的，或者是一开始到是什么形状跟现在可能不一样，所以他说虽然说某种形式的裙撑呢 were first worn 最早已经被穿了 在16世纪的时候就有人穿这种最早形式的一种裙撑了，但是 their peak in popularity 就是他们受欢迎程度的尖峰，那什么时候有呢？什么时候来呢？ Their peak in popularity came， 所以他们最受欢迎的时候是什么？是 during the 19th century， 在19世纪的时候，而且是在维多利亚的英国 in Victorian England。
Commonly constructed from rigid materials, I would say rigid but flexible materials because you needed them to be stiff, but you also needed them to have some give. So rigid means stiff. So these materials were like whalebone or steel. I mean, also wood and cane were still used. Steel was very, very expensive, and I doubt that everybody was using steel. Anyways, hoop skirts enabled women's outfits to adopt a shape that emphasized a slender waist and wide hips. So it allowed you or enabled you to have this big skirt and very skinny waist.
Commonly constructed 一般是由什么所建构出来的呢？一般是由 rigid 在这里就是僵硬的 stiff S-T-I-F-F 它由僵硬的材料所建构出来的。那什么僵硬的材料呢？举例 such as 例如说鲸鱼的鱼骨头 whalebone 或者 steel 或者钢，那但其实钢在那时候很稀少，所以其实另外一个常见的是可能是木头或者藤，那是这样该做出来的。所以这个主词 hoop skirts 它 enabled women's outfit to 它让女性的服装可以干嘛呢？ Enable A to do B 它让女性的服装可以做到什么呢？可以做到 adopt a shape 让它有了一个形状， adopt a shape 就是有了这个形状，所以它让女性的衣服女性的服装可以有一个形状，这个形状是怎么样呢？ That 就是指这个形状 that shape 它会 emphasized 它会强调会凸显 a slender waist 一个细腰，所以那个时候审美认为女生的腰要细才好看，所以他们这样子穿就可以凸显他们的细腰，还有呢 wide hips 他们的这个宽臀
Prior to the invention of the hoop skirt, so before the invention of the hoop skirt, women would rely on wearing multiple petticoats. A petticoat is an underskirt. And some of them, like in winter, were made out of wool to keep you warm. But they're often made out of linen or cotton. And they would wear more than one of these. They would wear multiple petticoats under their skirt to get the desired silhouette. And sometimes the petticoats would have layers of ruffles on them to also help fill out the dress. And they would also use things like horsehair lining to help the dress stay stiff and to stand out.
好，所以呢，它 prior to the invention of 就在这个东西发明之前，在这个 the hoop skirt 发明之前呢，女性她们会 rely on 她们会靠什么呢？她们会靠穿 wearing multiple 就是 more than one 很多层的 petticoats 就是衬裙 under their skirt 他们会在裙子底下穿很多层的衬裙来得到 the desired silhouette 得到他们想要的那个轮廓。
However, these petticoats were heavy and thus restricted movement because you'd be walking around with all these pounds of cloth hanging from your hips.
但是呢，这个衬裙呢很重而且呢 thus 就是因此therefore, consequently 或者 in this manner 它会 restricted movement 它会限制你的行动，限制行动那个限制就是用 restrict 那个行动就是用 movement。The
hoop skirt provided a lighter and more manageable solution to achieving a fashionable look. So if it's more manageable, it means that it's easier to take care of or easier to move around.
好，所以呢，这个裙撑它提供了一个 lighter 比较轻便比较轻的，而且呢 more manageable 更可以处理的。其实在这里这个 manageable 就是更便利的一种 solution 解决方案。To a solution to 什么？那个 to 是介词，所以后面接动词的时候要加 ing， 要讲 solution to achieving a fashionable look， 所以它可以提供一个更轻便、更便利的一种解决方案，让你可以达到 achieving 一个 fashionable look 时尚的外观。
So for women in Victorian England, wearing a hoop skirt was an indication of high social status. The bigger your skirt, the more rich you were? Not exactly. But as long as everybody in the upper class was wearing big skirts, if you were in the upper class, of course you're going to wear a big skirt. An indication is a sign.
Yeah, 所以 对于维多利亚英国的女性来讲呢，穿戴这个裙撑是怎么样？是个 indication of， 是一种象征，一种指标，或者是它可以告诉人家什么事情啊，叫做 an indication of， 一个 sign， 一个 token，T-O-K-E-N， 是一个什么指标？什么指标？它可以告诉人家说你是个 high social status， 你有很高的社会地位。
And on top of that, these new lighter skirts offered several practical benefits.
好，那 on top of that， 除了是跟社会地位有关系之外呢，这些裙子他们也提供了几个实际的 benefits， practical 就实际的 benefits 好处。
So in addition to providing comfort and ease of movement, because they literally held your skirts away from your feet so you could walk easier, they also served as a barrier to others. A barrier means something that gets in the way. And in fact, at the time, there was political cartoons made about it, about how hard it was to get close to a lady because her skirts were there. So there's some probable historical reality to this. Because apparently the skirts would give women a greater radius of personal space. A radius means the area around a point. So if the point is the woman and your skirt is big, it's harder for men to get into your face.
Yeah, 所以呢，他说 in addition to， 除了，那这个 to 是介词，所以后面的 provide 要加 ing 哈。除了提供 comfort 舒适，还有 ease of movement 啊，便于行动之外呢，他们也怎么样 served as a barrier to others， 对于其他人来讲也是一种障碍，一种屏障。Giving women， 他给妇女们一个 a greater radius， 一个更大的半径空间， radius 就是一个半径画出来的一个圈圈空间，所以他给妇女一个更大的半径空间，是什么样的半径空间呢？是 personal space， 个人的空间，所以变得比较大，因为你那个裙子范围很大，所以其实这个男人或者是想要接近你的人没有办法那么容易接近，因为那裙子挡在那边。
So this attribute or this quality was particularly valuable in crowded places.
好，那 attribute 就是一个特性，一个属性，一个 property。那这种特性呢是 particularly valuable， 特别有价值。valuable 就是 of great importance 或者 of great use， 尤其是在 in crowded places， 在很挤的地方。所以各位如果说是女生，你曾经在很挤的地方被挤得很不舒服的话，那当年你可以穿这种裙子，那要用不锈钢做出来一个裙子大大的，那别人都没办法靠近你。
Now, it should be noted that the hoop skirt design had several drawbacks. A drawback is a problem or something that made it not quite as good, including the risk of catching fire. For instance, there's a very famous case of a poet whose younger sister burnt to death at the end of a party because she was dancing around the room and her skirt caught fire and they were unable to put it out in time. Like, she didn't die that night, but she died of her injuries several weeks later, which is... Horrible. It was pretty horrible, but also it wasn't that uncommon. It wasn't like daily, but like several cases a year, kind of common enough. And so that was a problem. Or another problem was when in the working class started imitating the upper classes and they were wearing hoop skirts to work. You might recall that Victorian factories didn't have a lot of safety barriers like factories nowadays. And so their skirts would get caught up in the machinery and then that would create injuries and horrible things. So they would become entangled in machinery.
好，所以 it should be noted that 就是值得注意的是，那这个裙撑它可以怎么样呢？它的设计，这种裙撑的设计，它有几个缺点 ，drawbacks 就是缺点，一个 disadvantage， 包括什么呢？它的缺点包括 the risk of catching fire， 这是个 real risk 啊，就是你可能会着火。Especially near， 尤其当你靠近 open flames， 就是所谓的明火，或者是 fireplaces 壁炉。各位可以想象，这个上流社会的人常常客厅都有壁炉啊，然后有火啊，或者在烤肉啊等那种明火。那这个裙子一不小心就着火了，而且这不是这个很少见的意外，各位可以想象，这是蛮常见的一个缺点，一个意外啊。那刚刚 Angela 老师有举例了，历史上真的有人就这样子就被烧死了，他不是当场烧死，而是受到伤害，可能受到烫伤等等的，这样子去世了。那这是一个问题，另外一个问题，它会 becoming entangled 就是被缠住。在机器里面 machinery 就是你如果穿着这个衣服旁边有个机器在运转的话，很可能就被卷进去，那你这个裙子被卷进去，你人要及时逃脱不是那么容易。
Also, if you consider that chemistry was like the great big deal at the time and people were learning how to dye fabrics and create new fabrics that never existed before, and a lot of these new fabrics and dyes were very flammable.
Yeah, 那尤其那个时候很多衣料大家都在创新，希望能够做出更好的布料来。那个时候这些布料里面可能有一些也是很容易着火的。
Anyways, nevertheless, even though there were these problems, its popularity endured for many years. I mean, if you think about it, makeup nowadays, the makeup that everyone puts all over their faces has been demonstrated to be full of horrible chemicals and PCBs and all these other dangerous things. And probably, in 90 years, people are going to be like, why did women put all these dangerous, poisonous things all over their faces? I mean, that's still a thing we do, and we kind of just accept the dangers. Like, well, maybe some person might have a problem with it, but I'm only using it a little bit. It'll be okay. So it's the same attitude that these women had towards their hoop skirts. Like, some women got burnt up, but I'm going to be careful, and I'm not going to go near fire with it. So it'll be fine. This is just very human. Anyway, so the popularity of hoop skirts endured for many years. It kept on being a thing for a long time due to its stylish appeal and relative comfort.
好 ，nevertheless， 但是不管怎么说呢，它的 popularity， 它受欢迎的程度是 endured， 就是持续下去。endure 就是坚持下去，虽然说可能有一些困难，但是它还是坚持下去了，就一直到现在还是很受欢迎的意思。For many years， 很多年，不是一直到现在，就是它有很多年的时间呢，它的这个受欢迎的程度一直持续不坠。那为什么呢 ？Due to， 因为它的 stylish， 它很时尚的 appeal， 那个吸引力 ，appeal 就是 the power to attract 或者是 interest someone。而且呢，还有它的 relative comfort， 穿起来还蛮舒适的，可能很通风之类的。Yeah.
Also, the pockets. When you had those big hoop skirts, you could carry enormous amounts of things in your pockets underneath. And this is something that's rarely discussed in fashion history, but is a big deal.
好，那另外一个很重要，除了这个凉快之外呢，舒适之外呢，还有很大的口袋，可以放很多的东西。Yeah.
Okay, so today hoop skirts are recognized as a significant stage in the evolution in the history of women's clothing. Like, it's definitely a part of women's clothing, especially European women's clothing, illustrating how fashion, comfort, and social status can be balanced. I'm not sure if fashion, comfort, and social status are ever balanced because that's a whole nother article. But yeah, that's how he ended it. Okay.
好，所以今天呢，群称是被认为是 are recognized as 是一个 significant stage， 一个重要的阶段 in the evolution， 在这个演化上面是一个重要阶段，而且这个演化是什么？是在妇女服装的历史上的演化的一个重要的阶段。然后 illustrating 就是它举例给我们看，让我们看得很清楚，或者它显示告诉我们时尚 fashion comfort 舒适，还有 social status 社会的这个地位呢，是如何的可以被 balanced， 可以取得平衡。
So that's the end of this half of the article, but tomorrow we're going to continue on and discuss what we just talked about today, but in more detail. And we're going to get into panniers, which is one of the coolest things of 17th and 18th century fashion, I think. So please come back tomorrow to finish out the article with us. And until then, bye-bye.